Okay, well, it's 2:31. I think we can go ahead and get started. So I just wanted to kind of set this off. First of all, I'm going to very happy that Laura Lee Bentel agreed to do this session for us. She's on our board, and she also serves as the ICWA Institute Chair. With this particular session, I just wanted to let you guys all know this is a rapidly evolving dynamic, this whole reason to know and active efforts, especially in regards to the most recent some of the more recent Supreme Court cases that have been coming down. So I had actually invited the AG's office or the department to come and say, hey, what are you guys doing? How are you responding to this active efforts, reason to know standard? Could you come and do a session for us, kind of letting us know what you all are doing? And they're all like, yeah, we'll get back to you on that. And then they got back to me and said, yeah, we're not ready. So we have been trying, and Laura's been really good about kind of compiling kind of where we are, where things are going, and basically to kind of give you guys a little bit of insight and insight into kind of where we are with ICWA and when it comes to Washington State. So just wanted to get that all out there. Laura, thank you for agreeing to do this when no one else would, quite frankly. So floor is yours.
Thanks, Ryan. And you know me, I like taking on a challenge when it comes to Indian people and Indian families and self. And I just want to say thank you, everybody who's on this call at this time or this Zoom. My name is Laura Lee Bentel, and I do come from the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Nation. And I'm quite honored to have been able to retire after a good 40-year career as starting out as a CASA volunteer in Spokane County, went to Tacoma, did a bunch of educational stuff, and was hired on as a GAL and an advocate supervisor, a CASA supervisor at that time. I have implemented a tribal program, the Kalispel Tribe of Indians program, and was honored to be with them for about 7 years, and came back to this side of the mountains, Tacoma, and finished my career here, and just retired earlier this year. And I'm amazed that in retirement, I'm as busy as ever, but it's kind of nice because I get to just zone in and go into working within Indian communities and stuff. That is my passion. And Ryan, I just want to honor you for everything that you have done over the years, and you continue to do for the programs, for the volunteers throughout the state of Washington. You're my hero. So I just need to say that first and foremost. So thank you, everyone. Ryan, we're gonna put up the PowerPoint. And as Ryan said, this is evolving. It is continually evolving. I am actually been hired as a QEW, which is a qualified expert witness for the state of Washington AG's office. So they're evolving into what they need to do. This law per se is not a law that is new. So reason to know, and I put sweetgrass there, and that's a ceremonial, some people would call it a weed, but it's actually a grass. And so I put that there because I want you to know that this is a journey. And Ryan, we can go ahead and switch slides. This is a journey into a topic that will evolve over time. The Department of Social, Family and Services is still trying to do policies and procedures. And so my objectives today is just have a general conversation from my standpoint of view, my understanding, and the two aspects and the content of when and why of reason to know and active efforts, because to me, they go hand in hand. And so I'm hoping and praying that, this will give you as volunteers, as staff, and may assist other parties on how to move cases forward when there is reason to know, and how to understand at a different level of active efforts. So, and I'm going to give a plug for an institute that we implemented 5 years ago. It's going to start next week on Monday, and it's at 2:30 throughout the week. And you'll get more information at a different level of how to work within Indian country, understanding the law. We have 2 great attorneys who will be presenting. We have Commissioner Ressa from Spokane County who will be presenting, and we'll have some people from the department. So me and my shameless plug. So thank you very much for listening to that. And I hope to see you all there next week. So Ryan. So this is a journey into reason to know. And where are we going to start? You know, I'd like to think that I'm going to start, because I put a lot of thought into this, and it was a lot of thought, because I like to sit and ponder of how I'm going to put this together. So I want to start with back in October 6, 1879, when the first students, as they were called, but they were actually children from Indian families that were taken to the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania. And it was a boarding school that was off reservations. And they just didn't go in there and ask, hey, can we take your child to school, you know, and teach them some things? No, I have to say, and if I offend anybody, I'm going to apologize first and foremost, but I'm going to speak the truth. I'm going to speak my truth of how I know what has happened to the people of the original founders of this land that you sit on. And that was Richard Henry Pratt. He was a general, and back in the day, they just went and took children. We called them baby snatchers, because that's what they would do. And if they didn't go in there and just take children, they would go in there and threaten the families. If they had little ones, infants, you know, toddlers, they would say, if you don't let me take these children, we're not going to give you provisions to survive on. So I get really passionate about this, and I hope you understand that not everybody has the knowledge of how the boarding schools really tore at the fabric of the American Indian people, and how at that time the abuse and everything that came about was try to assimilate, try to take away the Indian culture. Go ahead, Ryan. Thanks. This is a picture of just some of the children arriving at Carlisle. And as you see, they're in their native garments. They have their long hair. They know no English. They are sitting there after being ripped from their families. And General Pratt, his statement to the masses was, kill the Indian in him and save the man. These children right here, I would say probably half of them did not survive. And this is just a smidget of the thousands of children who were taken. So when they were taken, they were ripped of their clothing. They were cut their hair. They would be physically abused if they spoke their language. We'll take the next one, Ryan. So in 1900, thousands of American Indians were studying in almost 150 boarding schools around the United States. And this training that they did they trained them to clean houses, sew, be maids, industrial type of work. And they were barracks. I have to say that you may have heard recently that the First Nations in Canada found hundreds of remains at a boarding school. And what I know today is that the US is committed to searching burial grounds at these different boarding schools that were put together by the government. And also there, I just read something that there was a pilgrimage to Carlisle every year because these graves were not marked. And every year, American Indian families would go there and do ceremonial. So they would, put their families at rest and stuff. And, so I know I can get really, passionate about this. So as you see, and I stated in the prior one, they were forbid to speak their languages, their hair was cut off, and the tribes, parents tried to fight back, but there was no way that they could have done that just because of the government. So we're just going to move right into the next slide, and that is the ICWA. The ICWA Act, President Carter signed it on November 8th of 1978. And, and if we look at it, that really wasn't long ago, because if we go back in history, we go back in time, the assimilation of American Indian children started way back. So when President Carter was putting this act together, his hope was to be able to keep families together. I have to tell you that every once in a while, I will hear people say, well, that happened so long ago. No, that didn't happen all that long ago. The repercussions of trying to assimilate American Indian children still goes on today. So we'll take the next slide. So this just tells you just a little bit more about, why he passed the law, because of the alarming number. I mean, the alarming number that children were still being taken from families at really no reason. There really truly was no reason. So this act was put into a federal law. If I'm talking too fast, let me know. If you need to say something, it's good to put it in the chat, and I'll try and monitor that that on a basis that will help, bring clarity to this. Next, Ryan, please. I'm having Ryan help me because I am still trying to learn how to do a Zoom PowerPoint presentation. And next time you see me, I'll have it down. So the implication continues. So as you see, custody proceedings under ICWA is hearing. Their hearings are focused on foster care placement, termination of parental rights, adoptions, and placements that are related to the status. The status of this law is important. And I think the thing that is most interesting, that this law was done back in 1978. We'll go to the next slide, Ryan. And in Washington State, put their own spin on ICWA. So we have a state law as well that just enhances what the federal law talks about. So this was done in 2011. And these two laws are just now coming to you may say ahead, right? Instead of abiding by them back when they were enacted, here we are 40 plus years later, and we're still trying to make sure Indian children are not taken out of the home. They are not placed in foster care. They are not put up for adoption without notification to tribes. And so that's where this whole reason to know came about. And we'll take a next slide, Ryan. So I just wanted to show you this slide because the 7th generation is coming. They're going to help save the world, the human heart, and our spirituality. Chief Blue Star Eagle is a healer from the Yankton Sioux tribe. He's a medicine man, and he's a Sundance chief. Sundance is a ceremonial thing that happens within tribes. We talk about 7 generations of healing. So it takes 7 generations before healing can really take place. So here we are again, another 7 years, another 7 years. And just when you think we have it, here we are. We're going to be doing another 7 years of healing our people. And there's so much healing that continues to be done. You know, when boarding schools came about, when they tore the fabric of Indian families, there was physical abuse, there was sexual abuse, there was neglect, there was all these things that was not part of Indian families, not part of tribes, because children were sacred. Children are sacred, and I know that they're sacred throughout communities, throughout different races, throughout different cultures. They tried to assimilate, they tore it apart. So now that is why, in my viewpoint, my opinion, my belief is why we have so much dysfunction within Indian families, because they lost all that. They lost it. Okay. Sometimes I think I get on a little roll here, and please know that I'm just extremely passionate about keeping Indian families together. And I'm extremely passionate about the truth and helping people understand. So here we are. Is reason to know new? It is not new. The BIA enacted this. When does ICWA apply? If there is any reason to believe that a child is an Indian child, the agency and state court must treat the child as an Indian child. And until it is determined that the child is not a member, and only a tribe, only that tribe that people have talked about can make that determination. So, and then in 1978, when the law was passed, if you see, it talks about reason to know back then. I think as advocates, as CASA volunteers, as staff, this is not new. This needs to be talked about. And yes, I know there's a lot of frustration. There is a lot of frustration because I see it and I hear it. Because everybody, I'm not going to say everybody, a lot of people may say that they're Cherokee. Yes, there's possibility. There is that reason to know. So you still need to investigate that. The department still needs to look into that. So I believe that as a volunteer, as a staff person, and helping your volunteers understand that you can go about asking these questions. Example, I'm doing a case and there is reason to know, parents may not know specifics, but there is reason to know there is relatives who has come forward who have talked about American heritage, and nobody asked the question any further than the parents. Can you imagine if that came forward months, a year later, the implications that would have on a case? So please ask the questions, investigate your cases. Next. Thanks, Ryan. So here's some of the reasons to know the key holdings of the case that recently came down. And so a trial court had reason to know that a child is an Indian child when a participant in the proceedings indicates that the child has tribal heritage. We need to ask the question. An indication of tribal heritage is sufficient to satisfy reason to know standard. So if a family comes forward and says, yes, I have Cherokee, I have Sioux, I may have, Lakota, Mountain, Turtle Mountain, you need to look into that. There is reason to know. And the standard covers situations where tribal membership is in question, because you don't know. There are still families that are not connected, that may not know of a connection with the tribe, and may not know that they may be eligible for citizenship or membership or be enrollable. So please remember that the interpretation of reason to know is in favor of notice to the tribes, because they make that final determination. All right, Ryan. I feel like I'm just like talking. So, and this is my interpretation. Reason to know protects tribes' sovereignty. And you all know that each tribe, each federally recognized tribe in the United States is sovereign. So their sovereignty role in determining its own memberships. And so please remember that a child may not be enrollable at this time. It may be that child may have a descendancy, but tribes have the right to change their membership rules and regulations at any time. At any time. And I think that people need to understand how important sovereignty is to tribal nations and tribal communities. And it's not culture-based. It is based on the keeping the American Indian family together, their tribal heritage, their culture, their way of life. So this statute should be interpreted favorably for all American Indian people, all children, and all tribes. Tribes want to know if the state has one or two of their children. They want to be involved, but they need to be able to be notified, and we let them make that final determination. So next week, and I'm just going to say this because sometimes I get off on a storytelling binge, but next week we're going to be having Heidi Walker and Billy Peterson, who are from the Department of Family and Social Family Services, do a NAIR, which is the Native American Inquiry, as well as LICWAC. So that is going to be a very informative session for y'all too, to see the process of how to go about notifying tribes, and where you as a volunteer and or a staff can actually be a part of that. So at every stage of litigation, throughout the dependency, throughout termination, there needs to be legal notices sent to the mentioned tribes. Example, when I was employed with the county, I had a family that the parent stated that they were of Native American heritage. There were 5 children, notices sent out, and it came back as non-ICWA. There were 2 new babies born. The department needed to still go through the process. And you would think that just, a few years prior, they already had it. Every litigation, every child needs to have the legal notices sent. So every child will not be worse off by applying ICWA early in the case and asking the question throughout the case. And that's where, if there's family members that you can have conversations with, if there's fictive kin, if there's people who know this family, that is really, really an important piece. So there are a few other states around the United States that actually have their own interpretation of the ICWA. And I think that's very vital for the continuing of keeping the law, the federal law and state laws in the mix of helping Indian families. And I have to say that our state has done well. There has been a lot of children, get through the hoops, but I think all in all, what I'm seeing is that there are people within the department, there are people within the AG's office, there are people who are wanting to make sure that this reason to know law that was way back in the day is in the forefront, stays in the forefront of everybody's mind, because that way you don't have challenges down the road. And that child is able to stay connected to family, their culture, and their way of being as an American Indian. So, okay, next.
There's a question in chat, Laura,
Okay.
and about who is responsible for who does the investigation of a child's tribal heritage?
The department needs to be asking parents, family members, and they actually fill out an ancestry chart as best they can and sends that to tribes. But I also think it's important that the advocate asks those questions too. But the department is liable to do that. I hope that answers the question. Okay, so I believe that you cannot have reason to know and active efforts on 2 different pages. I believe that they need to be together, because that was some of the rulings from the Supreme Court that was brought down, was reason to know and active efforts. So active efforts is a term that is included in the ICWA law. It refers to the amount and effort a social worker must devote to providing services to a parent in order to prevent state removal of an Indian child from their care and to assist a parent rehabilitate so a child may safely be returned. What do you think that means? Anybody want to put something in chat for me? What do you think that means? Well, I tell you what. So we have one that says, thanks, Nancy, go above and beyond in your efforts. And that's true, but also what does that mean, go beyond and above? providing a list of services. Okay. To actively engage a parent, just not sending letters. Go to the residence. Thank you. More effort than any other case. And thanks for that, Tom. I think for me, I would like to see all children get active efforts, but since this is a federal law, we have to stay within that realm. But all kids truly do need active efforts. And I think that the department is stretched. And sometimes I have to give them grace. There's some really great social workers out there. And what I know is that they're doing their very best. So how can advocates, staff people help in this realm of active efforts? So Ryan, if we go to the next slide, please. So active efforts versus reasonable efforts, because right now the department does reasonable efforts with the majority of the cases. But if it's an Indian family, they have to do active efforts because that's the laws, right? So reasonable is they're going to send out a referral. And we all know that they send a referral to providers. They let the parent know that you have an appointment, you have to go here, here, and here. And that's in a letter, right? So, but active efforts is arranging the services, aiding in transportation, and helping the family engage. And to me, that means when you set up services, you are actively working with that parent to say, we're going to get you to this appointment. I'm going to give you bus passes, but I may, if I need to pick you up, if they live out, further than a bus, they would arrange somebody to come and pick them up and take them. But they're engaging the family at a different level. So reasonable is managing a case. Active is proactively engaging in diligent casework, and you're following up with parents. You're making sure visits are occurring. And that's really important in all cases, I have to say. Visits with family is across the board here. So meeting minimum policy standards is reasonable, but active efforts is that you're creatively meeting the needs of the family involved. You're doing more face-to-face contact than that's required by the department's policy, right? And that means you are engaging that family, you're talking to that family almost every week, if not more. You have to engage actively and creatively engage that parent. And sometimes I think that means that you ask parents, what do you think you need? I had a dear friend who had a story that they told me, that she was working within an Indian family, and this parent did not believe a psychological was needed for herself. She believed that they needed to go to a healer. They needed to do ceremonial healing because there was generational trauma. She did not believe a psychological in that arena was going to be helpful to her. So the social worker kind of balked, but my friend, she advocated for it. She advocated for this family member to get the services that she believed she needed. The court agreed, and this mother was able to heal in a traditional manner. She was able to have her children returned, and the department and the courts listened to her. That's creative. That's being creative to help a parent of, and actively, So, and goes along with the mainstream service provisions, because I know all of you have seen the court orders that are cookie cutter, drug and alcohol evaluation, psychological, parenting assessment, UAs, but how often do we find that some of these parents may not have those specific challenges, right? So we need to go into looking at, families, all families, but since we're talking Indian families, we're going to talk Indian families. We need to go in there with our blinders off. We need to be asking the question. So we're actually going to make sure that they're culturally appropriate services in the story I just told, right? Is there somebody within the tribe that can help this parent? Is there ceremonial pieces? And if they do have to be, in the mainstream, what services, what people would they be comfortable with? So you're going to be seeking service and management suggestions and actively co-case managing. And if a tribe is involved, they need to be involved. Tribes may not always take jurisdiction. They may just intervene, which means that they're a party to the case. They need to be actively involved in case management. So that's most important. Okay, here we go. So active efforts, and these are just some examples. We're going to engage the family, the parent, the child, extended family, the extended family, as well as the tribe. You're going to take necessary steps to keep siblings together. Even if they're a half sibling, they're still a sibling. And that's across the board too. You're going to identify services and actively assisting parents in obtaining these services. Diligent search for extended families. And I think that's where an advocate can be most helpful, is building a relationship with a parent, building a relationship with family members, and gathering information to see if a child can be placed with a family member or a fictive kin or another tribal member. You can identify community resources. We live in Tacoma, Seattle, Olympia, there's urban Indian services in this area. And we have quite a few tribes that you can tap into, even if they are a tribe from the Dakotas, right? You can contact tribes and say, hey, we have one of your children. How can I help? How can I help bring services to and make sure that this child's heritage, cultural needs are being met? So can you put any other examples of active efforts in here now? Facilitate parental engagement in services. Yes. Yes. Being able to document the effort to satisfy the court. Okay. And I think that's where not only those documentations, but the department needs to be able to document that as well. Because the court actually makes those determinations if the department is doing active efforts. And, and there might be some times where you don't see it, that active efforts. And so how can you have a conversation? I recently had a conversation with a newer social worker and was asking questions about relatives, and they had a great conversation with a grandparent, and the grandparent talked a lot about some heritage, and I had to remind the worker that step, one more step, did you gather names? Did you gather phone numbers? Did you gather any other information from this relative about any other people that you could be talking to? That's active efforts. So she goes, oh, thanks, because not everybody understands, the term active efforts. Active efforts. So Anne put in here, this sounds a bit like any tribal cultural services are interchangeable. Anne, I think that, excuse me, they can be interchangeable, but you need to be talking with the tribes within your community. You need to be talking to the tribe of the children, because they may be hundreds of miles away from their homeland, right? So it's important to know about the different tribes in your area. Does that help, Ann? Excuse me, I got a tickle in my throat. And, I'm going to put my email address at the end of this. So if you have any further questions throughout our time together, or through the rest of the conference that you come up against, I'm happy to help out in any way. I like to say that I'm here to be of assistance, to help break barriers, to help people understand. And we all come to the table with our biases and our judgments, and I think, because I have them myself. I mean, hello, I know them today. I try not to live in them. So I think my goal and my passion is to help others understand the true history, the true nature of how Indian children, how Indian families were treated over the last, few hundred years, and how we all didn't get the true history. We didn't get the factual history of what happened to my people. I mean, I have my own story as an American Indian woman, and there are times where it still brings me great sadness. And it's the story needs to be told. The story needs to be told. And I think that's where our Supreme Court justice stands today, is the story needs to be told. The law needs to be abided by. So, okay. So there's something in here, and I'm just going to read it. It says okay. And hopefully, there's not going to be much, I cannot do, case specifics. So I'm going to take this question, and maybe we can talk about it at a different time, Nancy. I think there's some information in here that I'd like to address, but I think I'm going to address it after we come back from a practice. I'm going to break y'all into groups. How many do we have, Ryan, in here? We have 46 participants. Thank you so much for being here, y'all. So what I'd like to do is we're gonna break into groups and we're gonna practice. I have a scenario for y'all. And Ryan, I was thinking probably, I don't know, 4 to 5 in each group. And I'm gonna give you about 15 minutes. In fact, Ryan, if you want to put up that next slide. Okay. So we're going to break into groups and we're going to practice. Oh. And here's the scenario. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Because sometimes when you do presentations, sometimes, you know, it can get lost in the interpretation. So I'm going to have Ryan put you in groups in just a little bit. But I would like you to get into the mindset that you're at an FTDM and the mother and father were asked at the birth of their child if there was any American, Indian, Native American ancestry. Both of these parents, the mother and father, mentioned to the social worker at the time that there were some relatives and they had a name and a phone number of a maternal grandmother. And at this gathering, the FTDM, the parents didn't attend, but the relative was invited and they attended. So the grandmother made a statement at this FTDM that she and other family members are enrolled members of a local tribe. And there was no further questions asked of this grandmother. So what would you do as an advocate, CASA? What would you do? I'd like you to come up with some questions and what other information, because you'd be invited to this, hopefully, what other questions and information that you would gather. And I want you to think of why asking these questions would be beneficial to the child as well as the family. So I'm going to send you into groups. Ryan's going to split you apart and I'm going to give you, well, it's like 3:20 now. I'm going to give you until about, 12, 15 minutes. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about it. Because I'm really hoping that your voice will be heard at this meeting. So any questions? Any questions? I don't see any. And Ryan, if you want to put them into so it looks like everybody's still coming back to the main room. And I have to say my group was quite lively and we had a really great conversation. So I'm hoping that y'all did as well. And I'm going to ask one person from each group if you would like to share of what came about in your conversation. And I don't know how many.
I just sent a chat about it, but our conversation was that since under our understanding of ICWA, and at least 2 of us had gone through the ICWA training, so that the tribes have final determination, we would first make that point. If unsuccessful, we would petition the judge directly to consult with the tribe.
Okay. So if you were in the FTDM, how would you make sure that those conversations with the grandmother was going to be?
That would be the basis of our petition to the judge.
Okay. Okay. But if you didn't get the petition to the judge, you know, because that's going to take some time, what would you do in that moment at
Well,
the FTDM?
My contact, you know, I'm in a small area in Whitman County, and so my access to the judge was fairly close. Let's put it that way.
Okay. And you probably have a great supervisor who's able to walk that with you, right? To get
Well,
that.
I wasn't dealing with this issue. I was dealing with a different issue that I was differing with both the social worker, the AAG's office, and the supervisor about what was best for the child.
Okay.
And so I insisted on my rights as a CASA to give the best interest of the child, to push this process through. And I guess I feel that under ICWA, you have the responsibility in the best interest of the child, because ICWA defines the best interest of the child, that the tribe be consulted. If there's any nuance of an idea that the child is a tribal member, that you would go forward and push the issue.
Correct. Well, thanks, Robert. I appreciate you sharing that with the people in the group here. So thank you so much. Is there anything else from your group that you may have come up with?
We pretty much talked about that.
Okay.
That was it. Once
Great.
I raised the rights of the CASA to go directly to the judge, that's pretty
Okay.
much where we focused.
Okay, and I'm gonna encourage everybody on this call, on this training today to actually attend the ICWA Institute as well. It would be a great foundation, and thank you, Robert, for that.
I will second that. The ICWA training was excellent.
So much. So another group.
Well, our group had quite a few.
Okay.
We would especially talk to Grandma, try to find out what tribe she believes she might be in, if she was enrollable in that. And then some of them went further and said then they would try to contact the tribe if it's a local tribe, and to talk to the chief or the social worker or whoever would be handling it, and find out A, what information they need, and B, what cultural activities and things like that they feel would be beneficial to the child. It doesn't matter if it's their specific tribe, but a local tribe that they could get involved with for services or enjoyment.
Right. And so if the grandmother was already enrollable and she was an enrolled member, she would be a card carrying Indian, you might say, and she would have a number, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how, as a CASA, did your group talk about how you would go about trying to find other family members for the children? Would you want to place the child with grandma?
Well, I think that would take some research to make sure that it would be in the child's best interest.
Okay.
That would be the first choice, is to place with a relative always.
Right.
And that, but not all relatives are equal, but that would be something that should be up at the very top of the list.
Right. And
I asked a question about that. Isn't it the tribe's determination at that point if the tribe wants to take on the case?
they can either take jurisdiction, which they would take the case. And a lot of tribes aren't able to do that because of the size and just may not have the funding, or they're going to intervene, which make them a party of the case. So they would be consulted throughout the tribe, throughout the duration of the case. Well, thank you. How about another group?
We had some communications problems because our members didn't have microphones or cameras, but we did get a little done through chat. I think mostly, grandmothers in general are great resources in cases for family history, other relatives, and then more about, if she's an enrolled member, she probably has a lot of information about the tribe and whether the mother or father, what their ancestry might be, including other tribes. Maybe it's not just the tribe that she's enrolled in. So, she would be a great resource for a lot of things. As far as, her as a placement, she might also know other family members who are good placements, because my experience with ICWA is, you can extend your search for possible placements, either through the tribe or through the relatives, in a lot broader search sometimes than just looking around Tacoma for suitable relatives or a foster home. And if your goal is to keep the child out of non-tribal foster care, then that's the resource you want. You want as many names and phone numbers and contacts. And then you have to work back and forth with the social worker. Hopefully it's a two-way street. Give them the information you have and maybe use it as a lever, even in a subtle way, to get them to pursue some of that. Because if it comes up later on that they had a list of possible placements and they didn't bother to follow up on them, that becomes a whole issue in the case later on.
Yes, it does, Tom, and thank you for that. And there was a question in chat. It says, so would a question for the grandmother be whether or not should be a placement? Yes, that should have been probably one of the first questions that the department should have asked, or as an advocate, you could ask. And if there's any other tribal relatives that may take a child. Yes. So thank you, Tom, for that. And it's nice to see you on this Zoom training. Good that you're still involved. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Sure, Tamara.
If I remember from the previous ICWA training, that a non-family member or relative within the tribe could be considered as family member.
Correct.
And therefore be eligible to be a placement, even though they might not be a bio relative to that child.
And that we call those fictive kins, right? Do they have history with the child?
Right.
Yes. Thank you for that, Tamara.
So we did address the question of why was it important to the child? And I recalled a video that I had seen that interviewed some adults and older teens who had been placed in non-tribal cultures and really had not had any engagement with their culture, and really felt strongly there was something missing in their lives, and they didn't feel whole until they were reacquainted, reintroduced to the tribe, and had opportunity to participate in ceremonial experiences, and that brought closure and wholeness to them. It was a video that really opened my eyes about the importance of that. We also talked about in the FTDM finding out whether the relative search had in fact been done and was it thorough, and if not, make sure that that was going to be done.
Thank you for that. And Linda, you brought up a really great point in that session, is that I'm sure some of you've heard, or most of all of you've heard, that there was a time in America, in our history, where they were just taking children from American Indian families and adopting them out. So they were raised in the normal Caucasian white family. And so, yes, there's a hole missing in these children's lives. And until they're able to come home, their life is not complete. That is such a really great, powerful statement, because I know as my history, my own history of that. So I appreciate that. And there's so many great videos on NICWA, which is the National Indian Child Welfare Association out of Portland, has great videos that talk about this. Yes, thank you for that, Linda. Any other groups?
I just want to say that we discussed this in our group, but in the event that a child's not placed within a tribe, a foster child, why not encourage the non-Indian foster family to take them to ceremonial events, to make an effort to fill in that blank, even if they aren't living with a tribal member?
And, that is such a great statement. I actually sit on LICWAC down here in Region 5, and that's the local Indian Child Welfare Advisory Committee. And that's what we do. That's what I do, is I advise, I give suggestions to non-Indian foster homes to do research on that particular tribe, right? They can go on websites. They can, find an elder within that tribe that can help them keep that alive. I have to say, even an infant who's an Indian child can have, music played for them. They can have, books read to them that is from their Native American ancestry, right? So I think as advocates, as volunteers, you have that ability to talk with foster parents who are fostering American Indian children to help them understand how important that is. So thank you for that. Anybody else?
Our group, the first thing we talked about was asking the social worker if the maternal grandmother would be considered a placement, and asking that right at the FTDM. And then it was also noted within our group a few times that the scenario wasn't really clear on where the case or where the social worker was at in the process of ICWA, and like where, if it was actually enacted or not. And so we talked also about asking the social worker directly whether the tribe had been consulted, or if kind of where the tribe was at, if it had been given party status, those types of things. And then also we talked about connecting with the tribe itself to see what kind of services it offers, if the child was found either enrollable or was already an enrolled member, and connecting with the liaison with the tribe to see kind of what their thoughts were on culturally what kind of services could be offered. And then also we talked too about the fictive kin, if other family members were not willing or able to be placements, if there were other fictive kin members that would be willing to accept the child. So those were just a few things we talked about.
That was great, Caitlin. And I think too, along that same line, is if they're not able to care for the child as a placement, how would they be able to support the family? How would they be able to support the children? Right? I think that's really important. Anybody else? I do want to, before another group comes on, I do want to address something in the chat. It says someone in our group mentioned that there is a national group that does the research to verify the membership. What is that group? No, there is no national group. The state of Washington has a NAIR unit that notifies tribes. The tribe is the only one that can make determination if that child is American Indian or not. So there's no national group that does that. So I would maybe have to have some more information behind that. But to my knowledge, there is no national group that does that. It's tribe by tribe because they're sovereign nations. Okay. So Nancy, you're on. Did you have something that you were going to share with us? Yes, it is NAIR. Excuse me.
Yeah, it's sort of, I suppose, a question in a way, and it relates maybe to what Kaylin was mentioning about the idea of tribal services, that in terms of what would be beneficial to the child, of course, you know, we all immediately thought cultural connection,
Mhm.
but that that the tribe itself, that the child could benefit from specific services that the tribe might have that might not be strictly cultural, but are social and could create a sense of connection and belonging, sort of a structure that the child can fit into and feel rooted. But I don't know what those might be. So it's partly a question, I suppose.
Yeah, and I like how you posed it, because there are, the child may not need services, but they need that connection, right? So I know the Puyallup tribe has different, like they have drum making that children can do attend. They have, meetings with the elders, story time. They just have, different. I mean, and I'll go ahead and say it, powwows and stuff. I think a lot of people take powwows like that's a big cultural thing. It is, but it's not everything, right? So I think it's important to reach out to the tribes and ask them what they have. And if they're not in the area, what the foster family can be doing for that child. So there's many things. And I think services for parents, tribes would, like Puyallup has great services that if you're an enrolled member of a tribe, that they can utilize, that are going to be culturally appropriate. So yeah, I hope that answers, Nancy, and kind of clarifies some things. Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. Because sometimes, I have to say, y'all, sometimes I'm a storyteller. So you can ask a question and I'm going to go walking over here for a minute, and then I'm going to come back here. And sometimes I just need to say, people need to say, Laura, come back. Right. And it's all good, because I know myself well enough to go out on a story or two. Okay. Anybody, did we hit all the groups? Yeah. If we did.
I've got a question.
Okay.
It's a generalized question. Okay, so you're going around, whether it's Native American or not, you're going around saying, okay, what other family members or fictive kin could take this child? Is it thoroughly explained? And the family member says, oh, well, I don't know if I can. Is it made clear to them what services are available to them if they take the child? I mean, I wonder if a family member's going, well, is this kid just going to be dumped with me and that's that?
Well,
Is that explained to potentials?
You make a good point there. And that's where the social worker needs to be explaining to these relatives, what is it they're going to be required of them, right? Because sometimes placement is just that. They just place the children there and they consider that a relative placement, and they may need some assistance. So that's where, the social worker needs to step in, right?
Well, and the other thing is to ask the people, what do you need?
Question.
What do you need?
Yeah. And I have to say, I've done this work long enough to where if I had a family, a parent who wanted and was showing, not only complying, but making progress, I'm going to step up for that parent and make sure that they're getting everything that they need as well. Because we all know children reunification is first and foremost across the board. Kids want to be with their parents. So how can we help families, right? How can we help families be together? So, okay.
I just wanted to say that I've been doing this for 11 years now as a CASA guardian ad litem in Jefferson County. I was in Alaska for 33 years. I have a lot of friends who are Alaska natives, and and I'm finding now that one of the things that I have to do constantly is speak up, speak up, speak up. If I were in this meeting, I would be talking to the grandmother at the meeting. This should have all been done beforehand, but it doesn't. A lot of times stuff doesn't happen. And so as an advocate, we just have to be greasy wheels. Just keep talking, keep asking, keep pushing.
Carol,
That's
thank you
my
so
comment.
much. Thank you so much for saying that, because that is the truth of, that's the truth. We need to be those squeaky wheels. And I used to love to tell my advocates, you know, be that thorn, be the thorn, because sometimes the thorn is going to prick things and they're going to make people stand up and say, hey, okay, maybe I should be doing this. Yes. Ask the questions, ask the questions, ask the questions. Carol, thank you so much for saying that to the group here. I couldn't have said it better, so I appreciate that. And it looks like we just have a few more minutes. Ryan, can we all can you put the next slide up, please? Because I think, you know, we could probably continue to talk about the different things, but I think Carol said it the best. We need to continue asking the question, right? So here is Sitting Bull. And he said long ago, let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children. That is so true to even this day. So please continue to educate yourself, continue to ask the questions, continue to just be the voice. Because I have to let you know, and I've said this, and I know Tom has heard me say this, and maybe a few other people that are on this call, that volunteers, you are the heart of your programs. You are the heart that keeps children's heart beating. You keep them from getting lost. And here we are helping American Indian children not be lost any longer. And as it was said by Linda, there is a piece of a whole missing in Indian children's lives when they are raised non-Indian. Thousands of children were adopted and did not know that they were of American Indian heritage. And once they found out and came home, their life was full. So please continue to see what you can do for our children. And the last slide is question. We don't have time. Ha! Thank you, Ryan, for moving on. So the spirit, keeping the spirit of ICWA at the forefront of everyone's heart. So never stop asking. Never stop asking. And I appreciate y'all being here. I would love to see all your faces. And I just got a beautiful message from my sister, Lisa. Lisa, I love you, my friend. And I'm going to come over and visit you soon. So anyway, I get emotional because she means that much to me. So anyway, I raise my hands in honor of each and every one of you for being here today, continuing the work. Thank you, Lemlets. And I am done.
Thank you.
Okay, and you all will have my email. I'm going to put that in there. Take it. Know that you can utilize it at any time.